So I woke up early this week to the chemicals in the sky, in the air, and I talk about the hazy shade of spring, man. I mean, smoke right here in our nation's capital. You could begin to feel it from those raging wildfires in central Canada over the past 6 weeks that has been traveling southwards. That's been progressively causing a haze across much of the northeastern and middle Atlantic United States that really hit those areas hard over the last few days. And it also thrown quite a lot of shade on those areas, figuratively, resulting in bad air quality. My allergies are off the radar screen. There are advisories affecting around 110 million people. And if you're in that area where the air quality has been deemed somewhere from unhealthy to hazardous, you may want to err on the side of caution. Because let me tell you, all those toxins, and particular matter, wildfire smoke, that wildfire smoke can bring some particularly concerning health risks, as we're about to explain now with our CIA operative who's on the ground, and what he's going to share with you is pretty startling. Mr. Operative, thank you so much for joining us. And you have a strong background in this. What can you share with our audience? And we are being told that this shade is, the ending is nowhere in sight.
Armstrong, it's an interesting mess that they have up there, because the Canadians are being real tight-lipped about. I haven't been able to find anything on the direction of the fire, what is it burning through, because people are complaining about chemical taste and gasoline and things like that in the smoke. It must be burning through urban areas, because if it was just a wood fire or a forest fire, you wouldn't have that kind of stuff floating in the air. But if it's sweeping through areas and it's burning up automobiles and other things that have fuel in them, it's bound to be you're going to have other smoke mixed in there, particulate matter from burned up things with fuel or rubber and other things that come from an automobile. It's hard to say, because it's very difficult to get a good answer out of the Canadians. I haven't seen any thorough discussion of where it is, what's burning, and how long they expect it to burn. And whether we always publish the state of the fire is 50%, contained, 40% contained, whatever. I haven't seen any of that. Maybe it's coming out in the States, but it's not making its way overseas where I am.
Well, I tell you what, between the piling count and the air quality, this is so unusual, because I have actually had to wear a mask. When I was in the vehicle coming over, you could still smell and feel the stench through the windows of the vehicle, Mr. Operative.
Yeah, the particulate pictures that I've seen just from Virginia alone, you're a long way from the Canadian border. I can't imagine how bad it is in New York, because it does thin out as it travels. But in Virginia, it was the same way. In the Tidewater area, it was very smoky, and you could see it easily in a phone video. It's not you're not guessing about it. It's not a cloudy day. It's just the sun's blocked out with a haze that you can't see through, and visibility for flights. There's things that are affected by this that we don't really pay attention to, but at a certain level of particulate matter, you can't land airplanes anymore because it's ingesting too much stuff through the engines.
So what is the chemical smell?
I would suspect that that's being produced by the fire burning through areas where there is other material. If it was just a timber fire or a forest fire, you shouldn't be able to smell or taste particulate that tastes like fuel or metals or something. I mean, that's just not something you would get in a forest fire. But if, like in California, when they burn through neighborhoods and they lose all the houses and all the stuff that's in the house is burned up, the cars are burned up, the tires burn up, all the pieces of an automobile, it puts all kinds of distasteful stuff in the air.
When we were growing up as kids, especially on the farm, we would burn, when we would have to burn, we would have to burn off to make sure that fire did not get out of control with the smoke. there are ways that you could deal with this. Because let me tell you something, Mother Nature has a mind of its own, but as a farmer, you learn how to address these issues. I don't understand how and why the Canadians have allowed this, for this to get so out of control.
I don't either. It's an irresponsibility on their part, not managing your natural resources. You get all this climate change noise from Canada and all this conservation noise, but what are they doing to manage their forests? What are they doing to manage the timber business that's up there, which is an enormous operational activity from the Canadian business community, because timber, there's so much rural area up there and they grow a lot of timber. But if you don't manage it, you end up with wildfires that consume it all, and then you don't have anything for the next 20 years. It eventually grows back, but it has to be managed and cultivated just like a farm. You have to take care of what you have. You don't hear about places like fires like this in like Europe, where the big joke used to tease the German guys about having the Burgermeister, the guy who was the forest manager. It was very rare to hear about a fire burning anywhere in Europe because they managed their forests like a very valuable natural resource.
You know, that's a very good point, because I think California is an excellent example. Its palm trees are not maintained, and when those palm trees are not properly manicured, it's sort of like the fun on it is sort of like dry, brittle. And you look at a place like Florida that has nothing but palm trees and some of the forestry, you rarely hear of this problem happening in Florida, and yet we hear often of the fires that burn out of control on the West Coast in California. What's the difference between California and Florida?
You know, a great example of that is when you go to visit Disney World. If you're ever up in the middle of the night, like I've been there for trips with my kids at various ages of their young lives. At night, the park is teeming with maintenance people, and people are running up and down those palm trees, trimming the fronds off, taking coconuts off because they don't want something dropping off and hitting a park visitor. But they trim it all off and haul it all away because dried palm fronds are like matches.
No. It's like dry paper. That's what it's like. It's like dry paper.
It's very, very flammable.
Yes.
And they clean it up and take it away. And there's a disposal process that they use where they incinerate that stuff, or they grind it up and use it. I mean, they don't waste anything down there. But you're not allowed to do anything in California. Everything is protected. You're not allowed to cut a tree down without permission, and you can't clear brush around your house. You have to have a permit. It's the state has so intruded in your personal life. You can't do anything without either paying a fee, getting a permit, or just being told, no, you can't do it. And then they get all upset when they had this roaring fire through a very nice area of a mountain region where it consumes 100 houses, kills 20 people, and burns everything to a crisp in a matter of a couple hours. That's because all the kindling is on the ground and it's up close to the houses.
You know, even the Phillies games were rescheduled as a result of the outdoor atmosphere. But I want to move on to the fact that the evacuations continue in Ukrainian-controlled areas of the southern Kherson region as the area reels from the flooding brought by the collapse of a major dam early in the week amid these fears of an ecological catastrophe. Now, Kyiv and Moscow have blamed each other for the breach, which occurred in territory occupied by Russia. Now, the cause remains unclear, and many people are looking at these satellite images and show that the dam was damaged just days before it collapsed. And President Zelensky is describing the situation in the occupied part as sort of Kherson as catastrophic and called for support from the international community. What are you hearing from that part, from both sides?
There's a huge mystery with this whole report, Armstrong. There's 6 dams on that river, and at the end of the line, it empties into the sea. If they have a flooding problem because there's damage to the top of the bridge, I mean, there's little doubt that there was an explosion of some types because it blew off parts of the top of the bridge. But the integrity of the dam is not gone. If that were the case, there would be a torrent of water down there, a wall of water. It's just flowing over the damaged area. My question that came to mind when I looked at all the video that I was able to find here overseas is, why don't they open the gateways in the other 5 dams? If you have the ability to control and do flood irrigation, you can throttle the controls to move more water or less water. If they have a rupture on the first dam, then open the gateways as you go south on the river so that the water has a place to go. And then it won't flow into the city. It'll flow all the way out to the sea if you open the gateway. That's the reason they've got multiple dams on that long river. But there's no answers. It's just like the Ukraine puts out this story that this is what's happened, and everybody jumps on it like, well, it must be the truth. And then it gets reported, and then they fan everybody into a white heat about, oh my God, this is so bad. People are flooded out, and there's people in rowboats being evacuated. And it's just it doesn't fit right. It's the same thing that they're doing with their big offensive, their counteroffensive. Who announces when they're going to do that? The Ukraine seems to. I mean, I've never seen a war where you announce your schedule.
It certainly doesn't add up. You know, I want to conclude my conversation with you. I want to come back because we cannot help looking at the images and how the fog is captured, even our nation's capital. So if Canada is sort of affecting air, can you sort of explain to us why we supposedly meet all these clean green standards here in the United States, and sort of how would it make any difference if China and India are not doing the same thing?
That's a great question that no one I've seen in positions of authority has the courage to ask or answer. The pollution that you see in the air comes from like 3 or 4 major countries are the major producers of it. We course corrected in America consistently over the last 25, 30 years. First, it was, we remember we had acid rain. That's the curse of being old enough to remember all this stuff. And then we had problems with pesticides, and that's why we had a bald eagle problem with them fading away. We discovered what it was, we course corrected, and they've all come back. We stopped manufacturing leaded gasoline. We have clean fuels now, or much cleaner fuels. They're not perfect, but they're certainly not polluting at the level that you have in other nations. You could do everything. You could destroy the American economy and make our lives miserable here, living under some foolish notion that this is going to fix everything. If the rest of the world isn't on board, you're not going to fix the problem because other countries don't care. China does not care about this. They don't care about any of it. And all you have to do is see where their Belt and Roads stuff is operated in Central Africa. When they come down there to mine, they strip mine the country. They ravage the nation to extract the minerals. And they don't do remedies the way we do here, where you've got to have land recovery, you've got to replant, you've got to cope with erosion. You're not allowed to have runoff anymore into pools like we have in some of the old mines still in the northwest of the United States, in Colorado, Montana, those areas. You can't just dam up all your arsenic and all the toxic chemicals. None of that's allowed anymore. We're the only ones that are doing that.
And we'll continue to be the only ones for some time. Listen, Mr. Operative, always appreciative of having you on. When we come back, Arthur Marvin Peake, Out of the Tunnel, and Robert Hillard, one of our favorite civil rights attorney and radio hosts, will join us. Don't go away. So, Robert Patillo, let me, and I'm sure you're up to date on this story I'm about to share. The Maryland State NAACP has concerns about what it calls an intolerable situation for African American students in Maryland public schools. In a public statement released this week, the NAACP of Maryland said it has attempted to work with state and local education agencies to remedy the dreadful education circumstances that confront the children. They cited the lagging academic achievement, students graduating without the necessary proficiency, breakdown in school discipline, the inappropriate treatment of special education students, and school-to-prison pipeline. And they said no longer can we allow school systems, whether they're governed by African Americans or whomever, to continue to destroy our children's way of life. Is this unprecedented?
It's unprecedented because this is the first time I can remember of an organization going through the legal means as opposed to a political means to try to address this. Normally, if you have an issue with your school board or the issue with the educational system, you'll say, well, let's vote for a new mayor, let's vote for a new city council president, let's petition the state for more funding. This is the first time when you have civil rights attorney Ben Crump and other community groups literally suing the city over the conditions in schools. And I'm hoping that this, if nothing else, brings attention to the need for education reform nationally, because Baltimore is not alone. We have a public education crisis in this country that needs more attention being brought to it. I would love that the same amount of attention that people bring to getting drag shows out of schools, we will bring to bringing more educational opportunity into schools. And the national conversation has to shift, because right now our students are lagging behind almost every other industrialized country, and now most of the developing nations are catching and surpassing our young people because we do not take education seriously. We see school as just being somewhere to watch our kids while the parents go out and make money, and we are not preparing them going forward. I'm proud of the NAACP for taking this unprecedented state, and I'm hoping other jurisdictions will do the same thing. Parents and community organizers coming together to do that, because if you have a national push on this, maybe that will finally get the national resources necessary.
I think I'm going to stay with you. I think the most important question is why, after so much progress, that the kids continue to suffer the most. And is it that the educators no longer have the capacity to teach the kids? Are the teachers restrained? Are the classrooms too full? Or is it, some can say, is it the teachers union? Why is it so consistent, particularly in these disenfranchised communities all across the country, that this continues to happen to these brown children?
Because these are the people who don't have lobbyists. There's no one who is a lobbyist for young people and for children and for the public school system. Think to yourself, how often do you see new schools built versus how often you see new stadiums being built by major cities? Or how often you see new housing developments and multi-billion-dollar condos being built? Because it's not an instant economic driver, because it does not have lobbyists pouring millions and billions of dollars into it. That's why people take their eye off the ball with public education. And particularly when it comes to poor children, because poor children, their parents are more likely to be working more hours, to not be able to attend school board meetings, city council meetings, etc. And so it's easiest to put them behind instead of standing up and doing what is right for those communities. And this is why it takes a concentrated community effort to make changes. It's not as if the money does not exist. It's just simply the question of how do we allocate it. Your first day of political science class in college, they say politics is the question of who gets what when. And for some reason, we've decided in this country, students get the least last.
So Marvin Peake, a serial entrepreneur, ambassador of peace, we welcome you to the broadcast. You know, all of us get these pop-ups on our phones. And, you know, these pop-ups with young kids, children, going live on TikTok, celebrating going into these stores and stealing and looting as if it's a badge of honor. And we, being entrepreneurs, can only imagine the impact that has on those small businesses that could literally put them out of business. Why is this behavior becoming so acceptable? Why are there no consequences for it? And what will it take to change this, to make these kids realize that this is wrong, and eventually, whether they realize the consequences or not, sometimes they may pay a price for their life, because not everybody's going to sit around and allow you to destroy their way of life, destroy their business. Somebody's just going to snap, and you're going to shoot these kids just like the behavior they're exhibiting, like animals. This is what's going to happen.
Absolutely. You know, it is unacceptable, and no one wants to lose their business and lose their wealth. They work so hard to create a business, and someone comes in and steal the merchandise and then brag about it on social media. But let's remember that the crime didn't start with those kids. It didn't start with those children. This has been a systemic problem that has been going on in this country for a long time before they were even born. It doesn't make it right. See, America doesn't necessarily have a poverty issue in terms of economics and crime, way of life. The true poverty is in consciousness and heart. There's a lack of it, because you have those who have more, and then those that are being marginalized, looked over, set aside. They say that America is the land of opportunity, and that it is, and we're grateful. I've traveled the world, and there's no other place I would rather live than here in America. However, opportunity only suggests that there's possibility, which is great. But when do we become a nation of access, which gives people a way in, where they can have expression, where they can take whatever they came to this planet with and share with the rest of the world, that they can find value in themselves and value in America.
Let me interrupt you. Well, then, how did you? If that's the case, then how did you find success? What was so special about your life? Were you just saying you're an exception?
No, not an exception at all.
Okay.
Listen, what I did was I rebelled against the conditions. I rebelled against the poverty. I rebelled against the crime, the violence in my neighborhoods. I rebelled against those things because I knew that there was something more in me than what was around me. And so when I grew and created organizations to help people just like me, we had our government that was financing, keeping people in those conditions.
So are you saying that the kids don't have the same capacity as you through honor and work ethic and discipline, and no matter what the obstacles are, you can still find what we consider to be the American dream?
You can still have it, but it has to be presented to them, and there has to be
presented to them by whom? Their parents, the school, TV.
So by every person on the planet. Let's understand this: that every person that is here, we are innately microcosmic co-creators of the universe, God, our America, and the world's intent and purpose. None of us are exempt. When we start to do it, each individual, then we create a critical mass that would send a message to America, to the government, that this has to shift. But it's not going to be done only because I've been hearing this story since I was a kid. And we talk about the crisis, what's happening in the school, what's happening in crime, and it's the same thing over and over again. But when do we take resources that will open up and give people access to speak for themselves, to give expression, to have a sense of belonging and ownership? That is missing, and it's never talked about.
Okay, so while all that sounds good and well-meaning, what is it that they must do in the process in terms of their own accountability and responsibility in what you're discussing?
What has to happen for each individual? With me, I saw examples. I saw standards, right? Outside of the environment that I was in. I looked at people of sports. I looked at Michael Jordan, and I saw how he would fight to win those games. And it inspired me so much. And everyday life was my basketball game. It was my game 7. And I would fight to win. I would fight for the next meal. I would fight for a place to stay. And I used that to teach other people, not necessarily forcing people, because some folks just don't want it. They will resent you for helping them. You have to know that you want something better. But you have to present people with something better, because when you see it, you hear this all the time, you can be it, you can do it. But where is it seen? When they're stuck in these communities, the resources aren't in those communities, but they can look at TV and they can look at internet and see everybody with these grandiose lifestyles, and they want them themselves. How do I get that? Where's the way? Give me some inspiration. So I dedicate my life to helping these individuals and eliminating every excuse. You tell me what it is that you desire, and we put resources there. Another thing, taxpayers are paying taxes so that they can help to liberate not just themselves, but the people around them in America and the world. They need a return on that investment. We should look at our government that they said to me, we just want you to house homeless veterans. Feed them, give them housing, don't worry about them working, about being entrepreneurs. This is the way we want it. Well, I shut the program down. I'm talking about the Veterans Administration. I shut it down because these individuals have something to say in the world. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. So when you come to my program, I want to know where you come from. What are you doing now? What are your dreams and your aspirations? And put resources there and hold you accountable. So instead of giving money to have people warehouse them and give them nothing, let's put real resources of the mind and the heart in these individuals that will lift them, that will elevate them to be better individuals, so we can have a better community, a better America, and a better world.
It is Saturday, June 10th. I'm Armstrong Williams. Author Marvin Peake and attorney Robert Hillard will return after these messages. Don't go away.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Robert Patillo, in a landmark decision, the Supreme Court struck down Alabama's congressional map. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the majority, and he was also joined by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, giving the vote 6-3. Were you surprised? Your thoughts?
I was absolutely surprised. This is not something that we expected out of the Roberts court at this point in time, particularly given the 6-3 majority for conservatives on the court. And I think that this is further evidence that congressional Democrats need to use to push for the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. As most people know, since the Shelby versus Holder decision in 2014, we haven't had the enforceability of the full context of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And because of this, we've seen rampant gerrymandering across the country. This Alabama case is similar to a North North Carolina case from a few years ago, where the court said that the districts were drawn with almost laser-like precision in order to disenfranchise voters. We have to expand the franchise to more and more individuals. And for people who are listening who like to talk about election integrity, you can't have election integrity unless you have integrity of the vote, unless you have integrity of redistricting, unless you have integrity of voting location. So I believe the conservatives and progressives should work together to pass a new voting rights act that can truly protect our right to vote going forward.
Marvin, a media story. Chris Lick, the CEO of CNN, was terminated. Said he had the wrong vision, the wrong direction for the network. But even more startling, they're bringing Don Lemon back. And he's accepted coming back. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I was disappointed that they let Don Lemon go in the first place. But to have him back under what conditions? Does he have to toe the line? Will they control his voice? Will they stifle his expression, the truth in him? What are the conditions of Don Lemon coming back? Because if you're coming back just to move along with the agenda that they set out for you, then perhaps maybe you want to look at something else. Because again, each individual, we have our own individualized expression. And no one is here to tell us how we should and when we should give it. He has that human right. So getting Don Lemon to come back to CNN, I think it's a wonderful thing. But I hope and I pray that he's able to be Don Lemon and not just a figurehead for CNN.
Robert Patillo, Donald Trump has some serious legal woes that he's facing. It's almost like a slow drip. And we haven't even gotten to Georgia, and we still have to get to unraveling Mar-a-Lago and the classified documents. Do you really think that the time bomb for this presidential cycle for Republicans could be that Donald Trump could step aside and bow out?
Oh, well, I think less important than what I believe is what the Republican candidates believe. And if you look at the fact that Chris Christie, the former federal prosecutor, Nikki Haley, the former prosecutor, Ron DeSantis, the former prosecutor, and they've all jumped into this race ostensibly because they believe Donald Trump will not be on the ballot when the Republican primary voting begins next year. If you look at the Manhattan case, I believe that's going to start in March of 2024, the trial for that. We still have the Fulton County case, which should be coming out over the summer, which will be a far more serious legal case against President Trump, as well as the pending indictment of President Trump over Jack Smith and the 2 federal investigations. So the idea that he can simply walk away from all of those things scot-free, I think has always been navel-gazing and a fantasy for people who are on the pro-Trump squadron. And you will not be seeing people like Asa Hutchinson and Tim Scott and others hop into this race if they really believe Donald Trump will be on the ballot. Everyone is running to be the alternative to Trump. And this is why you talk about loyalty in politics and the lack thereof. All these people who are very loyal and dedicated to President Trump, the minute that he has legal troubles, they turn around and they start stabbing him in the back. It's very amazing to see that people who were so dedicated to him just 2 years ago are now the most fervent anti-Trump people in media. I think that's because they do not believe he will be on the ballot next year.
What is at stake for Republicans and the voter base that seems so loyal to the former president, Marvin Peake, if he is indicted? Do you think the support is already waning about Trump and they're already looking at alternative candidates because they may see the handwriting on the wall?
It's starting to look that way, but Donald Trump has a certain kind of charisma that people are attracted to. He has that magnetism. People are frustrated, disappointed, they feel disenfranchised, and he was the voice for some of their voiceless. And so they will support him against anyone. That kind of allegiance to a person is wonderful in some cases, and then some, it's very, very dangerous. Donald Trump, too, has an expression, and he does have a place. I'm neither for or against Donald Trump, but I think we just need to be aware and pay attention to what he's saying, his message, his behavior, and the millions of people that follow that. That is very critical for America.
Robert, what are your thoughts on the Republican field?
Well, I think you see the Republican field kind of stratify into a few different segments. On the one hand, you have the traditional conservative values conservatives, people like Mike Pence and Tim Scott, who are very much running on trying to restore the Republican Party to a pre-Trump phase. As soon as Chris Christie announced he was running, Donald Trump sent out a tweet or a truth on Truth Social of a doctored image of Chris Christie juggling plates at a buffet. I think Tim Scott and Mike Pence want to take the Republican Party back from being this kind of juvenile, insult-based, angry party to a party that really returns to those Christian values that existed previously. On the other hand, you have what I call the Trump impersonators, people like Ron DeSantis and Vivek, who try to have that same confrontational Trump style but combine it with policy, who try to continue the kind of a scorbing, abrasive nature of Trumpism in the MAGA movement while wrapping it around a more digestible version. And then I think you have the traditional rhino Republicans running in the middle, people like Nikki Haley and Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie, who are the traditional 2010 Republicans that we used to remember and who are trying to, who think there's still a lane for that. Now, among all of them, I think they have a monstrous task ahead of them trying to defeat Joe Biden. Other than age, there is not a criticism that many people can make of Joe Biden. 3.4% unemployment, 350,000 jobs created last month alone. The reestablishing of our position of leadership in Europe, doing more to defend the European continent of anybody perhaps since FDR. If you look at what he's done in Southeast Asia, reestablishing U.S. military presence in places like the Philippines and Guam and throughout that region, really taking the fight to China and taking the fight to ISIS and other terrorist organizations. Republicans don't even bother to try to run against President Biden at this point in time because they know how difficult it will be to defeat him. And I think that because President Trump, they're taking him off the chessboard already, it's going to be interesting to see which version of the Republican Party wins out and is actually going to be able to challenge President Biden.
Marvin, what concerns you about the Democratic Party, who seems to be on lockdown that Biden is definitely their guy for 2024? It is obvious he's fragile. He has cognitive issues, and that probably will only become progressively worse. And then you have people like Robert Kennedy Jr., who's announced he's running, and Cornel West, which is very interesting because if he's successful and if he can carve out 5% of that African-American vote, that would create serious issues for the Biden White House. Marvin?
Absolutely, absolutely. The Democratic Party has been taking really the black vote for granted forever. And we have this unwritten allegiance. And we put our hope and our dreams into whoever the Democratic candidate is. President Biden, bless him, old or what have you, he's done some wonderful things. However, there are so many things that are still lacking. But we still support him because it's a referendum against someone we don't want, Donald Trump. We don't want Republican. And we have to ask ourselves why. Let's take a look at the history of the plight of our people. Is there growth? Is there economic growth? Is there more ownership? We look at the 3.4% jobs, but look at the 3.4% joblessness in those individuals and ask them, are they satisfied? Are they happy? Do they feel like they're getting opportunity or access? See, we don't look at America and the world as one body. So the parts of the body, the organs that are hurting, which are those who are jobless or homeless or in poverty or suffering and crying out. And we were told that if we just vote, things will get better. Well, we've been doing that. We have the right to vote, and you should vote. But let's vote with some consciousness, with some heart. Let's look at what's going to be the bottom line that comes back that help all of Americans, and not look at the part of the back body that's hurting and just keep putting more resources into the parts that are strong. When we keep putting resources there and ignoring the rest, at some point, the body will start to shut down. And that's what scares me about America. You cannot overlook other people because you're not them. Maybe they don't have the same education. Maybe they're not in the same social groups. Maybe they don't have the same economic status that you have, but they are a part of a body. See, I am you and you are me. Without me, you don't exist, and without you, I don't exist. We are one. And if we don't get this message, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, because we're all in trouble.
I'm Armstrong Williams. Our guest, Marvin Peake, author, Out of the Tunnel. We'll hear more about that when we come back. Robert Patillo, civil rights attorney, radio host. We'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
What we all have in common today is that we're entrepreneurs. And sometimes even the most successful business people, including myself, benefit from hearing the perspectives of influential decision makers. You know, this week I had the honor of hosting two very distinguished guests at my home, the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, and his special guest, former House Speaker Paul Ryan. They graciously spoke to established CEOs, budding entrepreneurs, and individuals stating and starting their own businesses. When you've been running a business for years, it's easy to assume that you know everything and have nothing more to learn. However, engaging with these leaders reminded us that there's always more insight to gain in the ever-evolving business world, and their unique perspectives were truly invaluable. I was so grateful to have the opportunity to host them with entrepreneurs. In particular, the Speaker of the House, especially given the recent debt ceiling demands that he has just been through. And I just want to say, and I want to come back to my guests, you know, I think you both have it right. Entrepreneurs are very important. Their voices are not necessarily political. It's about what works for the marketplace. And the marketplace can be vicious, it can be kind, but it can be unforgiving. And I think what we need to do more is celebrate the marketplace, Marvin. And you talk about this out of the tunnel when you talk about your entrepreneur journey.
Absolutely. You know, celebration of success, particularly in business, is vitally important, because sometimes we get so caught up into the work of it. And pretty soon, if we're lucky, we wake up and realize that I wasn't a business owner at all. I was just a business operator. I owned the actual job. So understanding that every measure of success, even if it's incremental progress, it will show the strength and the love that you are putting into the business. And what you're putting into the business also goes back into society to help raise us up. I tell people all the time that there's a difference between resistance and resilience. Sometimes in business, we face so much opposition and so much resistance, and we don't want to accept it because we have this drive, go get it, work hard, the survival of the fittest, right? You keep pushing so hard, right? And let nothing stop you and keep running into a brick wall. That's what I was doing, and that's what I talk about in the Out of the Tunnel. I'm in this tunnel, and everything that I did before to get me the measure of success is no longer working. And then the light came on, because I am resisting. When you resist against something, you're resisting against the entire universe, and you'll never win. So I had to learn that resilience will show me incremental progress. And as I'm making that progress, I learn to celebrate. I start to feel good about it. I let my internal organs and my mind and my spirit be lifted up. And that helps me to succeed in business. And it also serves as a standard for those who want to go in business. You're not just working to working. You are a minister. You are a servant. You're not there just to make money for yourself, but to help improve life conditions for the people that are around you.
You know, Robert Patillo, and when we talk about, I heard Marvin loudly say, when talking about the Democratic Party, don't take us for granted, because the change and the progress that you keep telling us by voting for you is just not there. And you can say that about all these parties, because in many ways they're all the same. But what about talking more about the entrepreneurship, where the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, came to talk about business leaders and how business leaders make the difference, they are the difference, and how we need to encourage this younger generation to put aside the fear, but find your resistance, as Marvin discussed, and find the fact that you're willing to fall down but get back up. You learn from the struggle, not for the success. How important it is to talk about the next paradigm, which is entrepreneurship, which Dr. King said during his life would be the next civil rights movement.
Well, I think entrepreneurship, the millennials and Gen Z are perhaps the most entrepreneurial generations that we've ever seen in American history. If you talk to young people, they don't talk about jobs anymore. They talk about how they can enter the digital economy. They talk about how they can use generative AI in order to shift the paradigm on the way things have been done. As much as we talk about young people and screen time and them playing on their phones, in reality, many of them are going to be the entrepreneurs of this next generation, and many are getting started right now. Part of what we do here in Atlanta, one of our mentees, Mason Wright, started a hot dog company when he was 12 years old that he's now hiring summer employees for and doing interns with. So I think when you give young people the direction and you give them the mentorship and you give them the leadership necessary, they are ready, willing, and able to lead us into the future. The reason America has led the free world is because of our entrepreneurial spirit. There's only so much you can do with a state-run government in China or in communist Russia and some of the more autocratic regimes around the world. Is because of in America, you can invent something in your basement or on your living room table that can bring you to the top, that inspires and motivates people. And that has to be the center of our public policy going forward, because American innovation is what will lead us into this next century, not government dictates to us.
You know, Marvin, I'm looking forward to your book, Out of the Tunnel, an epic tale of battles. But I love your chapter on the gift of conflict.
Absolutely. You know, it's very important for us to understand the duality of life itself. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. What goes up comes down. There's an in and out. I talked to an electrician when I was writing The Gift of Conflict, and he was explaining to me what happens. He says, Marvin, you're just not turning on the light. There's conflict that goes on. There's a real war that happens, and it's natural. He says that first there is an interruption. Because something is silent and still, it gets interrupted. And whatever its nature is, it begins to disrupt. And that disruption causes a breakdown. And the breakdown then creates an opportunity for an opening that the current can go through. In our relationships, in business, and otherwise, we get an interruption, a disruption, and a breakdown. The problem is because some of us are so spoiled and ready to quit and find excuses that when we get the breakdown, we give up. And we don't give ourselves a chance to get the breakthrough. The breakthrough can never come if you don't have the breakdown. We embrace the conflict because we know on the other side of this thing, there's something great waiting on me.
You know, Robert Patillo, why is it so important to restore the role of men, not only in the society, but in our homes and in leadership? Why that is so important and vital to the survival and continuing success of America today?
Well, you know, God made two of us for a reason. There's a reason he made us man and woman. If he thought that we could survive, or if nature thought we could survive just with one and not the other, there would only be one and not the other. Survival of the fittest. We work best as a unit. We work best when we have someone to lean on, to rely upon. We work best when we have a place within the family, and I don't subscribe to traditional gender roles as they would be, but I think that having a strong father there is one of the most important parts of what raised me to be who I am today. I think that when we talk about the breakdown of communities, when we were talking earlier about shoplifting and crimes, I think having a strong father at home does a lot more to stop the way these children behave than anything the police or the government can do. And if fathers can reestablish authority within the home, then we'll have less interactions with police. I think very much educational reform starts with fathers at home. Criminal justice reform starts with fathers at home. Economic reform starts with fathers at home. And once we understand that you cannot do anything and go anywhere without having both parts of you, it's almost as if we were trying to do something with one hand tied behind your back or one leg not operating. We have to have both. And I think that that's the realization that many communities are coming to. And as we raise up and strengthen Black fathers, we raise up and strengthen Black communities.
You know, finally, Marvin, it sort of reminds me of your chapter about self-determination. Whatever we do, however young, wherever, it is a part about the self-determination of what we become.
Absolutely. You have to, you know, and this is something, it can be taught, but it has to be honed. It has to be practiced. It has to be a discipline, a way of life. You have to be determined to make your life better if it needs to be better in every facet. So when you see something that is not working, you do what you can. You see the progress. If it's there, you do something else. But giving up is never an option. Self-determination, being able to speak for yourself and not have someone identify who you are. The strongest force on a human being is to be able to live up to the behaviors of how they identify themselves, not as you see me. Because I'm growing every day. It was Alan Watts that once said that I am under no obligation to be the same person I was just 5 minutes ago. So if you're judging me on my past, have at it. Because right now I'm making a new Marvin every day, and I'm determined to grow, to evolve. And as I grow and evolve, I become a standard and a standard bearer that gives others permission and access to do the same.
Listen, I cannot thank you. And Robert Hillard, you know, you're one of our favorites. Love having you on. You got to go out and get Out of the Tunnel. I don't know if it's in bookstores yet, but it will be. I got an advanced copy. It's a super read. You must read it. It's very empowering. Thank you, WGLA 24/7, Greg Massani, Aaron Brock, Aideen King, and the great staff here at WGLA 24/7. I'm Armstrong Williams. Enjoy the remainder of your weekend.